He looks confused, and I'm not.
No, I'm just slow on the uptake.
Uptake? Anyway,
The
you
get
are,
down,
you are,
big.
you are. Oh, come on. You can do better than that. I'm big.
I'm big.
Oh, God. Now we're going doing voices. And I'm surly. And today I've got a
Oh,
lot
I
to be
could do
surly about.
voices. One of my mini characters is Jorge anyway, the person with the polylingual accent, which just lets me do whatever accent I feel at the moment. There's
Okay.
some things that are merited speaking in like your Scotty from the Enterprise. Like, I cannot do it, Captain.
In this day
That
and age, that sort of shit will get you in trouble, though, with the
I
wrong
know, and
sort of
I
people.
don't understand. This is part of what frustrates me about the people that identify on the left, right? If you haven't done the political compass, Google political compass, and it is a lot of questions,
It
but
really is, and it's going to take you like 15, 20 minutes. Don't be a lazy bitch.
it gives you a good representation of the fact that there's not a left and right. There's all other dynamics to it. And the political compass includes authoritarian and libertarian. So do you err on the side of liberty and freedom, or do you err on the side of either being an authority or giving up your power to authority? And that's one of the things that I find so frustrating today is there are so many people that are authoritarians, and especially on the left, they are authoritarians because they want to be the authority. They are the ones who want to dictate to others how
I would suspect that most people who are authoritarian by nature, it is more of a as long as it's not done to me sort of attitude. There's
which
nothing
you would think would be libertarian. Don't do it to me, but it's not. No.
As long as
do it
it's
to
not
everybody
done,
else.
as long as it's not done to me.
Yeah, I know. I'm picking up.
Libertarian is very different. It's don't do it to me, don't do it to anybody else.
Yeah. Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of the concept. Like, to live in liberty means that you have to accept that other people live in liberty. Rights comes with obligations. It's inherent. If you have rights without obligations, then basically you're fucking over other people because you have the power to get away with it.
And that's what people mean when they say privilege.
Yeah. And in a way it
white privilege is the fact that you are not going to be held to the same standard as a person of color.
And that is a really hard thing to see if you come from the lower class. But before we go any further, I want to remind people that this season is about why mobilization and general strikes the political voice of the voiceless in our democracies. In episode 1, we went over the housing gap that showed that 40% of Americans couldn't even afford a one-bedroom apartment by themselves. Episode 2, we went over the poverty trap that showed that basically our ways of life, and while all of these things focus on America, from my readings and from what I know of Canada, we have very, very similar issues up here. The poverty trap is where everything you earn and more has to go into just barely surviving, so that you are just, there is no way out. There is no social mobility. You are stuck. You are poor. You're one step away from the street.
When I was a kid,
just one second.
I know. I'm actually interrupting you on purpose.
All right. Well, if this is good, we'll step up in a second.
When I was a kid, I thought ends meat was some special horrible food you had to eat at the end of the month, because my parents would talk about making ends meet all the time.
Okay.
And I think I was like, oh man, I might have been like 17. It was probably like 11, 12, 13. before I understood what they meant by ends meet, because I actually thought that they were referring to a foodstuff that was horrible that we would have to eat. Because we got government cheese, we
Okay.
got government peanut butter. Government peanut butter's bad.
We didn't
Do you
have
guys have
that.
that in Canada? You don't have government cheese, government
No,
peanut butter?
not really, not that I know of. My I was never on welfare with either of my parents. My father was a student until I was like 12 years old, and my mother was on unemployment insurance every year, but I never got to the welfare level. Like
I don't think my parents were on welfare.
we had enough money for food, but by the end of the year, she didn't have enough for my birthday, and I'd have to wait until October when her EI kicked in to get my birthday present, sort of thing. Did
I think
some
with
shopping
us
at the Sally, that's about it.
it was probably a USDA program
Okay.
for farmers, because at the time
Hmm.
farm stuff was tanking. So I think they provided foodstuffs to farmers, and that's why we had it.
Okay.
Because my dad always worked full time and then
Hmm.
farmed full time,
Okay. That
which
sounds like
could
a
be,
lot.
yeah, it could be 120 hours a week. There's a reason why I was so stressed out when I was a little kid.
Yeah, no, that's ridiculous. People shouldn't
And
have to
then my
tend to live
mom
that way.
worked full time too,
Hmm.
and it still wasn't enough money. And this is in the 1980s
My parents
with
divorced when I
two
was
college
2.
educated people.
Yeah. My parents divorced when I was 2, and I was primarily raised by my father. So single parents with 2 children are often living on the edge of poverty.
Sure.
I was
Well,
lucky though,
especially
like
now.
both of my parents were somewhat actually well-educated, smart people, so they're able to do the best they could with that fashionist asset
Sure.
we had.
Part of the problem is also where you decide to reside. If I want to live near my family, I have to
Mm,
live in Southeast Iowa. The job
hmm.
market in Southeast Iowa, they claim there are jobs, but I have a college degree and
Hmm.
am not able to find a job that isn't manual labor that pays better than $20 an hour.
Yeah, and there we're looking at the wage stagnation since the 70s, but that's an entirely different topic. Just before we keep going
What
with that,
was episode 3 again?
episode 3 is escaping the poverty trap. And we didn't really get a whole lot into that because there's a lot of stuff to touch there on there. But I mean, how do you get out of the poverty trap is actually an episode I think we should revisit because
Mm,
it's not something any one individual can do by themselves. It's like most people are not going to be magically able to work themselves out of poverty when even when they're working 60 hours a week, they're not making enough to live on. To get out of the poverty trap is a sociological, social, society large change in how we have to look at work and what it means to work. Like, nobody should be working 40 hours a week and living in poverty. That's a choice that our politicians and our business class have made and that we have tolerated. And we have tolerated it to, frankly, our own destruction at this point. But today we were going to focus more on civility, which is an issue that is important at this point. A lot of people are concerned that it's getting a little bit too intense for everybody.
what's getting too intense?
The dialogues, people are worried. The noise
What,
has
that
finally
everyone's
gotten,
response is just burn the other person?
well, I mean, the culture war has had really detrimental effects on like weaponizing language and weaponizing beliefs. Like the wedge issues in America and Canada are brutal and being easily exploited by like lunatics like QAnon and shit like that. And
Well,
men,
that's not, I, QAnon was probably started as a joke.
I
It was probably
remember,
started as a troll.
looking
And
this up on
then
Wiki.
a right wing troll farmer
Hmm.
probably struck upon QAnon
Yeah.
and That's what it has become. Because I guess, do you know about troll farms?
Yeah.
Do you think the average viewer or listener knows about troll farms? Tell us what troll farms are.
I don't even really, to a large degree, necessarily think troll farms are a large part of the issue. Like when they trace back who was harassing Prince, what's her face, that Mrs. who married the prince, and then they moved to America, Canada, and then
Meghan
America.
Markle?
Yeah, it was 70 accounts producing most of the content that was about harassing her, is what an investigation found, is what I was reading. So, I mean, I really think this whole troll thing is actually rather overblown. I mean, they're able to hijack conversations not because people are easily misled, but because shit is so bad that people are looking for simple answers because they can't trust who they traditionally would trust, which would be the leaders, the press, their business class, stuff like that. It's very
Well,
been we've been
but
demonstrably fucked.
that's a problem of education. Like people that say, "Oh, I can't trust CNN," are people
Yeah,
who haven't been educated on the fact that
you can't
CNN
trust
has a
CNN.
bias. Well, they
They,
have a bias.
it's a
You
bit more
can
than a
trust them
bias
to
anymore.
have a bias.
See, and this is
And
the
so
thing.
you can
Yeah,
evaluate the information you get from them in the terms of what their professed bias is.
but
Fox is going to have
they
a
pretend not to
fascist
have
bias.
that bias.
Sure, they do. So does Fox.
Right. So this is, do you
It's
see that
all
if they're putting themselves out as trustworthy, and these people are essentially taking press releases and presenting them to the public as filtered through the dominant fucking whatever power structure is going down in the US at the time, the distrust, people should not have to think that the people who are talking to them are fucking lying to them. There needs to be
okay.
checks on that.
I'm speaking directly to the listener and the viewer. I'm sorry about this red spot. I don't know. It's genetic. I get dry skin there. You can't trust anyone ever that you don't know personally. You cannot trust institutions. You cannot trust politicians. You cannot trust anyone to behave the way you think they're going to behave because they are in their own story. They are the protagonist of their own story. And as a result, they are going to have that same expectation of, and if you extend trust to something like Fox or CNN, you are making a fundamental mistake of logic. And stop doing that,
All
please.
right. And
Okay, back to you, Josh.
the counter to that is that we need to be able to trust to have a functioning society. We can't allow institutes of these powers to be lying to us.
Well, what would you do? Are you going to constrain freedom of speech? Yeah, long
What does
pause
that,
there.
well, I mean, how,
If you tell someone they're not allowed to lie, you're constraining their speech.
right. If they're in the press, they shouldn't be allowed to lie.
What defines in the press? Is somebody's Facebook post
No,
in
as
the
in like
press?
people who have a
Facebook
publication.
claims it is like one big bulletin board on for the world. That's
Facebook
their
claims a
position
lot of
legally.
shit. Facebook is not the press. Citizen journalists are not the press. The
So
press
you
is,
mean
I'm
people
talking
who
the
get
fourth
paid
fucking
to be
estate.
okay? People who get paid to make
Yeah, like
journalism.
CNN, MSBN, shit like,
MSNBC.
that's the one.
Yeah.
Fox, The Star, Globe and Mail, fucking my own local press, The Telegram,
New York
APD,
Times.
yeah,
Yeah.
New York Times.
Washington Post.
We, the post trade, the thing is the media and government created the post-truth age. They wanted it. And now, like, if we don't want it, we're going to have to force these dirty buggers to tell the truth. That's just the beginning and end of it.
Well, this is
Hmm.
a direct result of the insane greed of neoliberal lunatics, nonsensical lunatics that turned journalism used to have a standard. It was a trade, and you had pride in your trade, so you did not foist over nonsense on people. As soon as the advertising part of the newspaper became more important than the news part of the newspaper, the focus became salaciousness. And what eventually happened was salaciousness and if it bleeds, it leads, and that sort of attitude has transformed into uh, talking heads where they're not actually journalists.
Yeah,
The
they're just
people on
fucking
CNN and
pundits.
MSNBC, they're pundits. They are
Yeah.
talking heads whose job is to talk about the news in a way that makes it seem like they're presenting the news. If you
Yeah.
watch any of those morning shows, what they do is they talk about newspaper stories for most of the time that they talk about other people's reporting. They don't talk about their own reporting.
Which is another issue with press is that the reporting is being done in an increasingly centralized fashion. So news is
If it's
coming
not
from one
like Chris
source.
Hedges, yeah,
Yeah, I'm talking mainstream. Chris Hedges is
sure,
not mainstream.
not anymore. No,
Was he ever?
he worked for the big guys.
Oh, did he? I
He
didn't
got
know that.
sick of their nonsense, and
Well,
quit.
I mean, if you look at Russell Brand had this, Russell Brand has been following the Joe Rogan saga, where Joe Rogan was accused by CNN of using horse medication, and it was prescribed by
What?
Dr. Blah. You don't know this? This is why you need to watch those videos sent you, man. All right.
The Rogan stuff I haven't kept up with because his podcast is no longer available since it got bought out.
Oh,
And I don't consume podcasts through uh,
he's still putting them
YouTube.
out on his. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, okay. To make a long. Okay. Oh God. Well, welcome. We were just talking about the news, and now we're going to talk about the news as if we were news people. Moving forward, Joe Rogan got COVID, and he went
Okay.
to a doctor, and a doctor hit him with like everything on the market, I guess, which include that
Invermectin. Invermectin.
ivermectin. And I guess this was originally developed for human use. Joe Rogan talks about it later on when he's getting pissed about this. I think he said something about there being
Oh,
a
okay.
Nobel
I
Prize
did
for it.
see a video about him and
Yeah, CNN
dude,
accused
did
him
you ever
basically.
take dewormer in Korea?
No,
Oh, I was told to take dewormer every 6 months.
really.
Yeah, it's a pretty normal medication. I've had ivermectin or whatever
All right, I wasn't.
as a
And
result of because the food safety standards are lower and you get like
worms.
intestinal worms and stuff.
Wow. Okay, well, anyway, back on track. CNN made a big deal about this, and instead of telling it that he got prescribed it, they basically talked about it as horse medication and like all this other stuff. Like
Sure.
it got memmed out as like, I
Yeah.
was really thirsty. I drank water today. Joe Rogan drinks liquid commonly used as engine coolant. So he's
I
thinking,
and I saw a lot of nonsense from like lefties posting memes like oh, they're taking animal medication, blah blah blah. Animal, your dog can take Prozac.
yeah, this is
That
the thing
doesn't
we don't
mean you
understand
are a
is
fucking animal.
most
You're not.
antibiotics human antibiotics go to the animal and the agricultural industry.
Yeah, that's part of a problem with our meat sources having too much
Yeah, it's how we're going to
antibiotics
develop
on.
antibiotic resistant
Superbugs.
superbugs.
Yeah.
But so back to this is like who
Okay, so
sponsored
Rogan took
CNN?
ivermectin or
Yeah,
ivermectin,
from a thing from his
and
doctor.
CNN made fun of him for it, and so he, being a comic,
No, didn't make fun of him for it. Presented it as if this lunatic was taking horse medication.
okay, it is horse medication.
It is for the way they were presenting. Okay, when you say the
It's people
agenda behind,
medication. It's like,
yeah, but they weren't
again,
presenting it this
dogs
way.
are
It was like
prescribed
this was
Prozac.
during when media was attacking people for taking this horse dewormer. So like the way they were
Sure,
talking about it, the
some dipshit
context
suit
actually
at
said
CNN.
it sounded like, oh no, CNN, a lot of people at CNN doubled down on this against Rogan.
Yeah, some upper management person told all of the staff,
Yeah.
we're going to go after Joe Rogan. I'm sure part of that
Well,
is
do you
motivated
know
on
who funds
trying to
CNN?
become relevant.
This is what I'm no, it's not even just that. There's another possibility here. Like I said, there was this Russell Brand video that we will post below where he puts a montage of who basically funds and what's the term for it? This show is brought to you by dot dot dot. And it's like CNN show after CNN show after the MSNBN show, or what the fuck it's called, and it's all Pfizer. It's Pfizer,
Yeah.
Pfizer, Pfizer, Pfizer. So I mean, like these, if this
If you
just looks
watch the
bad,
show with commercials,
yeah.
you see those commercials constantly.
But that's an inherent bias, especially when we're seeing like that. Take the Pfizer doing that in
I guess I need
context
to
with them
remember not everybody's had
slandering.
inherent bias training. Yes, that is a problem. They are.
Yeah,
It's also CNN attempting to get some shine from Joe Rogan because Joe Rogan has like what 5, 6, 7 times the viewership
yeah,
of
easily,
CNN. I don't know what it
easily.
is.
Media, the traditional media is now been left in the dust, honestly, and they
Yeah,
frankly did it to themselves.
I last time I looked at figures, like the big guys like Rogan and Dax
Hmm.
Shepard and whatnot were like the average daily viewership of a TV channel was like 10% of what an episode was. Now an
Yeah,
episode might only come out once a week.
yeah,
So, but if you add up 7 days, that's still 70% of the podcast's 100%
yeah.
viewership or listenership. So it's just people don't consume
Media these
mainstream
days.
media anymore. That's why I don't know why we spend so much time talking about it. It is, they are siloed. And by that, I mean they are in a bubble, they're in their own little world.
To be honest with you, there's a reason I would be focusing on them. Like, if you look at the political problems we're having, have you ever read Franz Kafka's The Trial?
A long time
Do you remember chapter 11, Before the Law?
ago. No,
All right.
no.
So Before the Law is basically a short story inside of the full story of Kay's journey through his administrative nightmare of a criminal trial of some sort. But in chapter 11, Before the Law, it's about this old guy who comes up to this door and it sees this guardian who's huge and intimidating, and this guardian is the first guardian of the law, and this guy wants to get through but he won't let him through, and he decides to wait, ends up waiting until he's an old man, and the guardian of the law just says, oh yeah, beyond me are more guardians. But that's a really good way to think about status quo, is like, what are the mechanisms by which the status quo maintains its equilibrium? Because a lot of people feel like they're weaker than the system in which they live, which is actually not true in any means whatsoever.
Individually, they are.
Yeah, but we are not a species that does well. I mean, them selling us libertarian individuality is probably one of the best ways to keep us from ever achieving anything against them. which is a different discussion. But what I'm trying to say with this is who are the guardians of the status quo? You have the judiciary, you have the legal system, you have the government, you have the business class, you have the press. So one of the reasons why we spend so much time focused on these disingenuous lying shitbags, pardon my French, is because if we want progress, there we have to break the foundation of the status quo. And these are
Don't you
those
mean
defenders.
shit bag?
Yeah, there we
Now I'm
go.
gonna get in trouble for doing a French accent.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are.
Shit bag.
You're engaged in cultural appropriation. Actually, uncultural appropriation, Snake Eyes, the origin story. Now, that was a movie I could not finish. I was just like, wow, this really
Really?
is very cringy in this day and age.
Because he's white?
Yeah, it's just like American
I
made.
don't know if you can still find it online because I think he paid to have it scrubbed.
Who?
But Middleditch,
Who's
I
Middleditch?
can't remember his first name. He was on Silicon Valley. Great actor, great
Mm-hmm.
comedian. He did a bit where he was a white guy from Hong Kong
Okay.
responding to people being angry at him for having a Chinese accent. And so the whole bit was like him speaking as if he had a Hong Kong Chinese accent, which he did really well. Like he clearly had put in time and effort to hone his Chinese Hong Kong accent
Yeah.
and spoke in that accent. And then people were like, why are you, he was like, why are you making fun of me? I'm not even trying to, because I will be targeted, I'm sure.
You? Why?
I'm not important enough for people to give a shit about. That's the
No.
thing. Like, if we did get important enough, people would go back and watch this episode and go, okay,
Yeah, but
now
by the
who's
time
that?
that happens, I suspect the PC thing lasts like Trey Parker, South Park pointed out really well when I was beginning, like the PC push usually lasts about 4 or 5 years. Like it really is a liberal construct that they use to try to disrupt the left. So
Mm,
I have a feeling it's not going to work this time because organization with social media is surviving the PC fucking meltdown.
I spend a fair amount of time with young girls. And yes, I said that phrase specifically to get you to pay attention, to take that world. But no, I have four nieces,
Ah, okay. I
and
was like,
they don't give a shit about that stuff.
no.
Now, they are also, their parents are like trumpeters to the nth degree. And so not living in reality at all. Like the
Yeah.
amount of cognitive dissonance I see out of them is shocking. But
Well,
um
this is the thing, is never underestimate the difficulty in convincing someone of your point of view whose comfort relies on you being wrong.
yeah, you almost got that quote right. That's pretty
Yeah, I
close.
had to adjust it a bit.
Yeah.
I'm really bad for direct quotations, especially once I've been on the noggin run.
Well, and we're not citing that. Yes, he's clearly, if you're gonna drink, I'm gonna smoke. It's really my only vice.
Terrible. Look at this reprobate. I mean, my shit's healthy.
Yes,
Smoke.
liquor. Rum of all
Well,
things.
I find that
Worked out great for all those pirates that died of cirrhosis of the
hey,
liver shitting out blood. Yeah.
rum is a tradition in my homeland. Actually is.
Josh is from Newfoundland,
I am from an island.
and I pronounced it correctly. I'd like
Newfound. Yeah.
credit
Yeah, you did.
from Newfies for saying Newfoundland, but I've now immediately lost that
The
credit
fuck you saying
by
Newfie?
using the word
The
Newfie.
fuck?
I know exactly. Like, we want to talk about civility. What about inadvertent incivility? When I lived in South Korea,
Hmm.
one
Oh
of
my
the
God,
things
yeah.
that one of the things that soured my relationship with the foreign teachers that I was exposed to in the town that I lived in was the fact that one of them was an English and a redhead. Now, in
Is an
Busan, before I moved to
absolute
this small
asshole when he
town,
gets drunk.
well, isn't everyone? But in Busan, we
You
would
took
use
it.
the
There's
term,
levels and levels.
in Busan, we would use the term ginger lovingly.
No, you would use the term ginger, and then they would get upset, and you'd be like, "Oh,
Well,
but I'm
in
cute and
Busan, nobody gave
fluffy."
a shit. In
In
Busan,
Busan, no one
literally
gave a
nobody
shit.
gave a shit. In
That's
this
not
little
true.
town that I
The
moved to,
Canadians gave a shit, but they are outnumbered by everybody else.
well, the only person whose opinion fucking matters in that situation is the person with red hair who's potentially offended by the use of the term ginger, right? If you're offended, tell the person who offended you
And I think
so
that,
they can modify their behavior and no longer offend you. Don't hold it against them and shit talk them over the course of 3.5 years and try and ruin their life systematically because they pissed you off one night by using the word ginger. It's not the N word.
what the hell?
I meant it lovingly.
This was
I am half a ginger.
what's that?
All
This
this white
was
in the beard used to be bright red.
Taejongdae, not Taejongdae. Where did you live? It wasn't, but
Tongue.
this was Tongyo. Tongyo. Yeah, that would have been Tongyo. That was a smaller community.
It was very weird
Hmm.
because everyone was all about accommodating everyone else. And
Yeah.
so the social interactions became this perpetual lowest common denominator nonsense
Well, I
because you
mean,
couldn't do the only way to do anything was to do something that everyone agreed to. But in order to get everyone to agree to it, it was fucking bowling or darts or going to the bar. That's the only thing everyone would agree to.
and in Busan, you could actually, there was enough people you could actually choose. And I mean, this
Yes,
is the thing. It's like you get rotted at me when I'm like, I'm going to take a pass. I don't feel like playing that instead of joining. You're like, you should take one for the team. I take one for the team.
but
You
that's
picked up
very
that
different
attitude.
than, but it's very different when you have a small group of friends that do one specific activity together. Like, I will play video games I'm not super into because my friends want to play that game,
Yeah.
and we'll play it for like an hour or a round or whatever. And then I'll suggest that we switch it up because I would rather play something I'm super into. So now it's your turn to do something you're not super into, right? Like
And
that's
I
part
just
of being
ghost.
fucking, well, that's why you're a shitty friend. Because part of being a friend is extending your boundaries to better match the boundaries of your friends. There's some things I'm not going to fucking do. I'm not going to drag my fat smoking ass up a goddamn mountain. I'm not going hiking. If you're going to go hiking, enjoy yourself. I wish you well. I hope you don't have to randomly poop on the side of the mountain because that's one of the reasons why I won't do it, because I'll have to randomly poop on the side of the mountain. I'm not going to do it. I have limitations. But if I can extend what my perceived limitations are to accommodate someone that I care about and better make them
Just remembering the
enjoy
time
the
I shot
world.
you in the ass with a fucking rocket because you were taking a piss in the ocean.
Yes, I shouldn't have been peeing the ocean. In my defense, it was 11:30 at night. There were no children on the beach anymore. It was just a bunch
Not
of drunk
true.
adults. Not it. I was like waist deep in the water. I
Oh,
didn't
I
so
know.
much piss in the ocean as walk into the ocean and pee. That's not the same thing. Like my pants weren't around my ankles, but being a fat guy, my pants were down just enough that you did manage to fire a perfect Roman candle ball that went like in and down my pants and landed on the top of my butt crack.
I
And I
still can't
still,
believe you that
I
that
still have a scar there. I can show it to you now if you'd like to see it.
no. I still can't believe that hit. Like you were so far away. Those things are horribly inaccurate.
So you're saying what you're saying then is that's what you were aiming at. If your statement is I can't believe it hit, then what you're meaning is your intention was to hit me with it. You just didn't think it was very likely.
It was in the general direction. Everybody was booing and hissing you, so I grabbed a rocket and yeah, it was a mistake.
I've been
I
booed and
am
hissed in the
sorry.
past.
Well,
I've
you
been
do
booed and
have a
hissed many
tendency to drop
times.
your pants and piss in public.
When you gotta go, you gotta go.
That's fair. So back to civility.
I'm not clearly. I'm like by a lot of people's social standards, that's in civil behavior.
Yeah, but
But I also don't drink much anymore.
do we owe the people who are destroying the planet and making our lives miserable civility? And
I
that's the
don't
real
know.
question.
At what point do we break? Because that's what worries me when we talk about massive uprising is there's a much there's a significant difference between a mob and a protest.
Which is why I've spent years trying to get people to protest. Because the mob will happen under these conditions. That's
Yes,
inevitable.
this is what the rich people need to get their heads out of their asses and notice is that they are squeezing us to the point where we are going to explode. There, have you
It's
ever
not
heard
like
the
me and
phrase "poke
you.
the bear"? Well, I
Yeah,
mean we in the
yeah, the global, the
royal,
poorest
yes,
sense.
yes. Us
We are
poors
the
are going
poorest.
to rise up and
Some of
literally
them,
eat you. Like the phrase "eat the rich" is going. Someone's going to. Well, someone's going to like rip the skin off Jeff Bezos' head with their teeth.
the problem is that it's not going to be, the problem is it's going to be lone wolf people at first.
It already
And
is.
in America, it already is. In Canada, we've been okay so far. Europe, there's been a bunch of them, but I mean, the best way to look at these people is basically people who are not mentally stable in the first place and are the first ones to crack. When you look at psychology on a basically like what you're disposed to versus how much pressure you're under, that's kind of how you should understand mental illness. And this is a health psychology thing I learned back in around 2001ish, 2002ish. So it could have changed now. But the idea then was that here's your susceptibility, here's your natural inclination. So here's the pressure. So if you're highly susceptible, it won't take much pressure. You'll just pop almost instantly, right? But if you have a lot of, if you can take a lot, it's going to take an incredible amount of pressure before you pop. So the first people popping are going to be literally our most vulnerable people, the people who are just, they're not going to be the brightest. They're going to fucking distrust everyone and they will target the wrong people. And sometimes they'll target the right people, and then you'll get shit like you did over in England with that MP dying, and now them talking about increasing security for MP. So, I mean, the way that the elites generally react in these sort of situations is they don't understand that their behavior as parasites are causing the problems. So they think that maybe they're making things tighter. Maybe if they could see more, maybe if they had a few more guards, everything would be okay. And it just, a boiling point is reached. And I mean, you'll see mob violence like you saw during the some riots back in the past and around the world, really. Like a lot of damage can be done.
It's why it's not out of the realm of acceptability to call them leeches, because not unlike leeches, they anesthetize you in the initial stages. But
They did
once the
too.
leech grows to a significant size, you can't help but notice it. At that point, it becomes a question of, do you remove it or do you let it kill you?
Yeah, really, eh? And this is the thing, we are at the point we can either have societies or we can have billionaires is really the question where we
Yeah,
are these days.
that's why I hate the term socialist. There needs to be a term for people who value the existence of society.
And see, this is the problem is socialist is a
It used to
fine
be
word.
citizen.
There's nothing wrong with the word socialist other than a bad PR game. Like,
Sure,
that's really what it is.
Bernie tried, and young people call themselves socialists all the time. People who don't think they like socialism love socialism.
Yeah, well, I mean, socialism is the attempt by capitalists to make capitalism less destructive so that it can survive. I mean, it's really not that complicated, you know? I'm
It
looking
is
for,
for the, I think it is for the average person. I think most people aren't like Josh and I are the equivalent of guys who obsess over their fantasy football league teams. It's just we actually give a shit about what's really happening instead of the fantasy football team. We are reality nerds.
I find it conducive to survival to understand what is going on around me. I think that people don't understand, honestly, how dangerous the world is and how fucked up people have allowed it to become. Like, we have lost almost 200 years of labor movement because people were lazy for 50 years. And the rich kept up on the class war and the poor's didn't. It's not a good look, right?
Poors unite.
What's that?
Poors unite.
And that is kind of what has to happen. I mean, we lost the labor unions to,
Greed.
yeah,
Greed by the membership of the labor.
yeah, really, eh?
Two-tier system bargaining was the labor union membership selling out future labor union membership.
Yeah. And unions got powerful because of the communities and they stopped, what's the term for it? Supporting the communities, which is also a problem, you know?
Well, again, the people in charge became people who were managing the system, not doing what it was intended to do in the first place.
Yeah.
I see it in the work that I do. There's gaps all over the place in providing care to people who have survived sexual assault.
Yeah.
But
Well,
we
social
don't have
services in
the
the
funding
US. Yeah.
and we don't have the manpower to, or woman power, because most of my coworkers are female,
Hmm.
um, to fill in the gaps. Because there's just only so much you can do. We do as much as we can and then become exhausted by become exhausted not just by the work, not just by the amount of darkness we have to eat, but also by the inability we are often faced with to actually really provide for our clients because our hands are tied, because we can't do something that would be construed as political, because our hands are tied, because we don't have the funding, because our hands are tied, because we don't have the little time to do it, or our caseloads are too big. Like, there's just, they cut our funding 8% this year. We'll probably get cut again next year.
Mm.
There's just, when you have a non-convicted but likely rapist as president, the priorities shift.
Biden?
No, Trump.
They both kind of are.
Well, this is budgets from last year. So
maybe you'll get some more money next year.
we'll see. I don't know. And I guess it's not just about the money, it's about what the money translates into.
Yeah.
People talk about this stuff as if that money isn't our ability to help someone who loses out on wages because they need to go to fucking therapy because someone fucking raped them and they're traumatized.
Yeah.
There needs to be and this is not this is my bailiwick. This is the area where I am knowledgeable, but this extends to mental health. This extends to domestic violence. This extends to survivors of violent crime. It extends to all these groups of people that aren't at risk. They literally have suffered as a result of risk. And we're not taking care of them. So if we're not taking care of them, think about how little effort is being put into taking care of people who are just have the potential to have something bad happen to them. And the whole system, we either value society and all the people in it, or society will collapse.
I mean, that's the idea.
Part of valuing it, all the people in it, is also to expect that from everyone else. To bring it back around to civility, is that people have to extend an effort to be empathetic and understanding with each other. And people who refuse to engage in that behavior need to be told that that's unacceptable. The billionaire class needs to get the message that their unproductive leech-like behavior has to stop. We need to pop that leech off.
Yeah, really, eh? I mean, this is the thing, is like taxation needs to be fixed so that we're just not fucking falling apart. All right. Now there was a really good one here. I was thinking, where is it? A quote for all occasions is kind of how I see this one. Is that it? Oh no. It's also the problem of finding it in the future. I mean, the idea is basically we want people to be civil, but how we treat people is really going to determine whether they can or will be civil, you know? If you're treating people like they don't matter, and they feel like they're going to go under the bus at any moment, they're not going to participate, right? It's way too far back.
It's the general effort by the rentier class to force
their
wealth into their own pockets, so that the lower class, as a result, has no choice but to react violently.
And that's the thing, is when poor people do it, it's violence. When business people do it, it's just business.
Business,
right?
Yeah.
So I mean,
the standards of behavior aren't.
Here we go. If this one has to deal with COVID-19, but I think it's something people really should be taking to heart. If you've been telling people to get vaccinated, let's change that with civil, because they owe it to other people in society. I think you're really underestimating the psychological effect of living in a brutal society that explicitly tells citizens they don't even owe each other basic food and housing to each other. So, civility from the people in positions of privilege is something we probably should expect, but is it something that we should expect from people who are having a much harder time of it? Like, there's people in society who will die because people don't give a shit about them. They literally have no obligation to any of us. We have broken the social contract and said that their lives don't matter for these people. Like to think that the people in society owe us stuff is to have created a society where they're going to be at least well enough off so that they're not at risk of dying, you know? Anything less than that is to like pretend that our violence doesn't have an effect on these people.
Well, and you've got people like dirtbag Joe Manchin saying that the reason he won't support the infrastructure bill, the reason he won't support Biden's agenda, the whole Build Back Better plan that had some good progressive stuff in it.
They gutted it.
Well, but Manchin's argument is we don't want an entitlement society.
But they do. It's just the billionaires are the ones who are entitled.
Exactly.
I mean, you have you have infrastructure and a social safety net, or you got billionaires. That is the choice Americans and Canadians face at this moment.
And what's truly strange is that they could have a billion or 800 million or 500 million and still be the top of the heap and be able to play their little game with each other over who has the most money and who's the most powerful and important, and
Dick measuring content.
still fund society so that it functions.
I mean, like
Still,
after
the
1
fact that
billion.
we in America continue to have a system of education whereby property taxes dictate how much money a school gets. And I think to some extent, the argument of having property taxes dictate how much money a public school gets is a good idea, in that it means that the value of the education that the students are getting at that public school is a public good. The public has an expectation. Even if I don't have a child, want students coming out of the local high school to be an intelligent, capable members of society because I helped pay for their education through my property taxes.
Society progresses when you can't have a society made up of fucking undereducated people filled with anger.
Well, this is why that system doesn't entirely work, though, is that if you're from an economically depressed area, then your school is economically depressed. And as a result, the quality of your education directly suffers. One of the Nobel Prize winners in economics this year showed that the amount of dollars spent on education for children directly results in increased productivity in them as an adult. So you are literally, what some people argue are entitlements is actually investment in the social fabric.
We're talking the people who are calling these entitlements are people who have probably done insider trading as a result of their positions, like Nancy Pelosi appears to have done, and other scum like that. Like these are not good human beings. These are people who have abused their power and privilege to reap fabulous rewards while throwing the majority of people under the bus.
And at least on the Democrat side, trying to convince them that they're still looking out for them. I don't think anybody at this point thinks the Republicans are looking out for anybody. Although I guess there are Trump supporters who really thought Trump was going to make their lives better, but all he did was create tariffs and wreak havoc.
He was just another American president as far as I'm concerned, except the press really fucking hated him. I mean,
he did worse stuff than anybody else would do, but he was also incredibly ineffective.
He was just overt about it. Things haven't gotten better under Biden and Camilla.
No.
Press just stopped talking about it.
Kamala.
Okay.
Camilla would make her an English lady.
I have no idea. As far as I could tell, she went from, kids in cages, hook, 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 to don't come fucking here, motherfuckers. So
I'll just take the high road because I know who runs your
Americans.
government.
I'm Canadian. I'm well aware we're a vassal state.
Yeah, if only Mexico was. Then we could get some more of them taco trucks.
Hmm.
In fact, I don't know. I have no idea, having never been to Mexico, if the taco truck is a uniquely American thing.
It could be. But I mean, really, to what degree do we owe the people making our lives a horror show manners? And I mean, this is really the heart of what we're trying to get at today. And it's a really hard question to answer. Because, I mean, there's the right to self-defense, but does the right to self-defense not include the right to tell someone to fuck off and watch it, or like to be rude and in people's faces? I mean, civility is really a tool of the oppressor used to minimize the voice of the people that they're oppressing when it's gotten to the point where they erupt in rage.
Particularly when you talk about protest,
Yeah.
because the purpose of a protest is to express outrage,
Well, I mean, JFK said if you make
demand change.
Yeah, if you make peaceful protest impossible, you, what is it, invite violent protest? Something like
Sure,
that.
something like that. Yes.
But I mean, another way to make peaceful protests impossible is to have it so that peaceful protests accomplish nothing. And that's what we're starting to see is protests have become less and less effective because nations are becoming less and less responsive as power consolidates and globalization has occurred. It doesn't matter that people here are pissed. The concentrations of wealth and what people can affect are diminished at this point, which is why a transnational global movement is required. And I mean, I know I hate to sound like fucking, I hate to use Marx, but I mean a global
Proletariat.
proletariat movement is essentially what we're looking at and looking for. I mean,
It's probably our best chance to avoid
international problems
global
require
warming
international.
catastrophes.
Well, this is the thing: is like an international war, species dies. We don't start dealing with overconsumption, species dies. We keep continuing with the fucking geopolitical pissing contest, species dies. Like we are in a, it's one of the best catch-22s I've ever seen. It's like we learn to work together or we learn to die together. So when it comes to civility, I just got one more thing to say on it. And then how about I let you conclude us out, all right? This one's called The Middle Ground. And I found this on Facebook at Human Reform Politics. It's called Seeking Middle Ground in Politics is the hallmark of entitlement. The middle ground is where the upper class goes to protect its power, control, and privileges. But there is no middle ground for the victims of exploitation, for those struggling to make ends meet, for those consumed by fear of uncertain futures, for chronic hardship that must be met with a sense of urgency. Let's be honest, it isn't necessary to make radical changes when the system promotes your interests and preserves your lifestyle. It is time to recognize centrist politics for what it is, a tactic employed by the privileged to ensure their privileges persist. And in Canada, this is very true. Trudeau is very much about protecting the billionaire class and protecting the status quo.
I think with some people, though, it is fear of change that motivates that and not nefarious intent.
Well, it's still the idea that we have to be consciously aware of what we're doing for us to be culpable or for us to admit we're doing something wrong is, and I think something we need to understand is not a good attitude to preserve. Just because I'm unaware of something I'm doing doesn't make me less culpable for having done it. Once it's brought to my awareness that I might be engaging in said behavior, it's something that I should take an awareness of and try to fix and recognize that in the past it was a mistake and move forward.
Which is why you, dear viewer or listener, should like and share and spam this to your friends that don't think about this stuff and want someone to help them do the thinking. Because that's really why I do this. And I think it's part of what motivates Josh is not that sounds awful and nefarious. I don't want to do your thinking for you. You think what you want. But I think a lot of times what people need are someone who can put into words what they are thinking. And that's what we're striving to do, is to put into words what you have already figured out. And you just need the right words to be able to explain it to yourself and to other people. And hopefully that's what we're doing. If we're not, tell us, respond, engage with us. Like, we're just two weird shut-ins that have a lot of opinions and time to do thinking about issues that are going to affect us. Because for us to the ability, the fact that we are shut-ins only is allowed in a society that is developed to the point where shut-ins can exist.
That's a fact.
And
So, I mean,
we're some of the first ones to go. It's been nice knowing you. If shit goes tits up, we're both dead.
oh yeah, my autoimmune disorder, it's the freaks who go up against the wall first. It's the oddballs.
And I have
The
never been anything
malcontents, the
other than an oddball.
discontents. And I mean,
I've never felt, even though I'm white or whatever, I've never felt included in any situation. Like, even situations I orchestrate, I feel out of place.
that
So,
probably had to do more with personality, though. But anyway, that's another conversation for another
but I
time.
think a lot of people have that same experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, what is it called? Alienation. We have a lot of alienation in our society. People feel alienated from their families, they feel alienated from their jobs, they feel alienated from their communities. There's a huge disconnect that's ripping our societies apart.
But that's the thing. What we're trying to create here is a space for those kind of people that care about these kind of issues.
Yeah.
And so if you do, like, share, do all the stuff you're supposed to do. I don't know. I'm not some like 16-year-old kid trying to not ever have to have a job. I'm just a dude that wants to make the world better in the tiny way that I can.
Yeah. And I mean, that's it. Here we go. So,
I've
like,
been big.
share. I've been Surly, and this has been another episode. Have a good one. Bye bye.